In the cold silence of space, far above the ruins of Earth, a faint signal flickered through the darkness. It was weak, almost drowned out by the static of the cosmos, but it was there. On board the orbital station EOS, Dr. Laura Monroe sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to decode the mysterious transmission. Her heart raced. Something about this signal felt different, urgent, dangerous. Beside her, Ryan Carter leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He wasn't a scientist like Laura. He was an engineer, more comfortable fixing broken machines than deciphering alien languages. But even he could sense the tension in the air. The room buzzed with low murmurs as other crew members exchanged worried glances. Whatever this message was, it wasn't good news. "Got anything yet?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. Laura shook her head without looking up. "It's complicated. The language is strange. Not like anything we've seen before." Ryan sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Strange how? Like we need a dictionary strange, or we're all doomed strange." Laura finally glanced at him, her expression grim. Probably both. The two of them had been working together for years, long enough to understand each other without needing many words. Ryan knew that look on her face. It meant trouble, and not the kind you could fix with a wrench. Minutes passed, each one feeling heavier than the last. Finally, Laura let out a sharp breath. "I think I've got something." She turned her screen toward Ryan, pointing at lines of symbols that had been translated into fragmented sentences. "It's a warning. They're telling whoever receives this to prepare for an invasion." Ryan blinked. "An invasion? From who?" "The Krylos," Laura said softly. The name sent a chill down her spine. She hadn't heard it before, but somehow it felt familiar, as if buried deep in humanity's collective memory. "They're coming, and they don't plan to stop until every living thing is wiped out." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ryan straightened up, his earlier sarcasm gone. "How long do we have?" "I don't know," Laura admitted. "But it's clear they're already close. Maybe months, maybe weeks." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and panicked voices crackled over the intercom. Someone shouted about unidentified ships appearing near Pluto's orbit. Laura and Ryan exchanged a glance. The invasion might be happening sooner than they thought. Laura stood abruptly, grabbing her notes. "We need to tell the Council. If this message is real, humanity has to act now." Ryan nodded, already heading for the door. "Let's hope they listen." Together, they hurried through the narrow corridors of EOS, their footsteps echoing against the metal walls. Outside the station's windows, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, lurked a threat unlike anything humanity had ever faced. And somewhere closer, the fragile remnants of Earth's civilization clung to survival, unaware of the storm approaching. For Laura, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Decoding the message was just the beginning. Now she had to convince the fractured leaders of humanity to unite, not just to fight, but to warn others. Because if the Krylos succeeded, no corner of the galaxy would be safe. As they reached the communications hub, Laura paused for a moment, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. For the first time in her life, she felt truly small. But she also felt determined. Humanity had survived wars, plagues, and the destruction of its own home planet. If anyone could face this new threat, it was them. And so, with Ryan by her side, Laura stepped forward, ready to sound the alarm. On Mars Colony Prime, the remnants of humanity's leadership gathered in a large, dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with tension as President Daniel Hayes stood at the center, his face lined with worry. Around him, representatives from different factions argued loudly, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Some called for surrender, believing resistance would only lead to greater suffering. Others demanded immediate action, pushing for reckless attacks that might do more harm than good. Laura Monroe and Ryan Carter stood near the back of the room, watching the scene unfold. They had just delivered their report about the alien signal and the impending threat of the Krylos. But instead of unity, their words seemed to have deepened the divisions. Laura clenched her fists tightly, frustration bubbling inside her. How could they argue like this when time was running out? Finally, Captain Ethan Blake stepped forward, a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper mind. He commanded attention the moment he spoke. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Arguing won't save us. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to argue about." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Ethan pointed to a holographic map hovering above the table in the center of the chamber. It showed the positions of human colonies, fleets, and the approaching Krylos ships. "We need to send a message, not just to ourselves, but to the entire galaxy. A warning. If we can alert other civilizations, maybe together we can stand against them." Leah Roberts, a young strategist with bright eyes and quick thinking, nodded eagerly. She pulled up additional data on her tablet and projected it onto the map. "It's possible," she said. "If we build a powerful enough beacon, we can broadcast across light years. It'll take time and resources, but it's our best shot." Not everyone was convinced. One council member, a grizzled man named Victor Lane, slammed his fist on the table. "Time and resources. We barely have enough to survive as it is. You want us to waste what little we have on some wild idea?" "It's not a waste," Ethan shot back, his tone firm but calm. "It's hope. And right now, hope is the most valuable thing we have." Olivia Grant, a scientist known for her work on experimental weapons, chimed in. "I agree with Captain Blake, but building the beacon won't be easy. We'll need materials from Titan Station, advanced AI integration, and constant protection while it's being constructed." Sam Dawson, the chief architect of Titan Station, raised a hand hesitantly. He was younger than most of the others, with a quiet demeanor that often made people underestimate him. "I can oversee the construction," he offered, "but I'll need full cooperation from everyone here. No more fighting. No more delays." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, President Hayes nodded. "Very well," he said. "We'll proceed with the beacon plan. But let me make one thing clear. Failure isn't an option. Humanity's survival depends on this." As the meeting broke up, Laura approached Ethan. "Do you really think this will work?" she asked, her voice low. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's the only chance we've got. And if we can pull it off, maybe, just maybe, we can leave something behind worth remembering." Ryan joined them, his usual sarcasm replaced by determination. "Then we'd better get started," he said, "because if those aliens are as bad as you say, we're going to need every second we can get." Together, the three of them left the chamber, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Outside, the red sands of Mars stretched endlessly under a pale pink sky. Somewhere beyond those skies, the Krylos fleet grew closer with each passing day. But for now, humanity had a plan and a glimmer of hope. On Titan Station, the largest human outpost beyond Saturn's orbit, activity buzzed like a hive of bees. Engineers and workers moved quickly, their faces tense with urgency. The beacon project had begun, and every second counted. Chief Architect Sam Dawson stood in the center of the chaos, clipboard in hand, shouting orders to keep everyone on track. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the noise like a knife. Laura Monroe and Ryan Carter arrived soon after, stepping off the shuttle that had carried them from Mars. They were greeted by the sight of massive metal structures rising from the station's surface. The beacon's frame was already taking shape, its skeletal outline stretching toward the stars. Laura felt a mix of awe and anxiety as she looked at it. This machine would carry humanity's final message to the galaxy, but only if they could finish it in time. Sam approached them, wiping sweat from his brow. "Glad you're here," he said. "We need your help with the AI integration. Without it, the broadcast won't reach far enough. Ryan nodded. We'll get to work right away. Just point us where we're needed. As Laura and Ryan began their task, tensions ran high. The Krylos fleet was closer now, detected near Neptune's orbit. Every day brought new reports of skirmishes along the outer colonies. Supplies were running low, and many workers feared they wouldn't live long enough to see the beacon completed. But despite the fear, no one stopped working. They knew what was at stake. One evening, as Laura pored over ancient alien scripts found embedded in the beacon's design, she noticed something strange. The symbols seemed familiar, almost like echoes of languages she'd studied before. She called Ryan over to take a look. "What do you think?" she asked, pointing to the patterns. Ryan squinted at the screen. "Looks like some kind of warning. Maybe from another civilization that faced the Krylos." Laura's mind raced. If these fragments were warnings, they might hold clues about how to survive, or at least how to prepare. She spent hours analyzing the scripts, piecing together fragments of meaning. It wasn't much, but it gave her hope. Perhaps humanity wasn't alone in facing this threat. Meanwhile, construction continued around them. Workers labored tirelessly, often pulling double shifts to meet deadlines. Among them was Carlos Mendez, a skilled mechanic who had a knack for fixing things others thought were beyond repair. When a critical component of the beacon malfunctioned during testing, Carlos stayed up all night to repair it, refusing to rest until the job was done. But not everything went smoothly. One day, an accident occurred when a crane carrying a heavy piece of equipment collapsed, injuring several workers. Panic spread briefly, but Sam quickly took charge, organizing medical teams and ensuring the work resumed without further delay. "We can't afford setbacks," he told the crew. "Every moment counts." As days turned into weeks, the beacon slowly came together. Its towering structure loomed over the station, a symbol of humanity's determination. Laura and Ryan worked late into the night, fine-tuning the AI core that would amplify the signal. Olivia Grant joined them occasionally, offering insights from her research on experimental energy sources. Despite the pressure, moments of camaraderie emerged. One night, after a particularly grueling shift, Carlos invited everyone to share a meal in the station's small dining area. For a brief moment, laughter replaced worry, and the weight of their mission felt just a little lighter. Still, the shadow of the Krylos loomed large. Reports of their advance grew more frequent, and the crew knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy reached Titan Station. But even in the face of danger, they pressed on. The beacon wasn't just a machine. It was humanity's last chance to speak to the galaxy. And they weren't going to let it fall silent. The crew on Titan Station worked tirelessly, but the strain of their mission was starting to show. Supplies were dwindling, tempers flared, and the constant threat of the Krylos loomed over them like a storm cloud. Every day brought new challenges, and sacrifices became unavoidable. One morning, disaster struck. A critical component of the beacon's power system malfunctioned during testing. Without it, the entire project would fail. The part needed to be retrieved from an old derelict ship drifting near Saturn's rings, a dangerous task that no one wanted to volunteer for. But before anyone could argue, Jake Thompson stepped forward. "I'll go," he said simply. Jake was a pilot with a reputation for taking risks. But this time, everyone knew the odds were against him. The derelict ship was unstable, its hull cracked and leaking radiation. Still, Jake didn't hesitate. He suited up, climbed into a small repair shuttle, and launched himself toward the wreckage. Laura watched the shuttle disappear into the distance, her hands trembling. Ryan put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He'll make it," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. For hours, the station waited in silence. Finally, the comms crackled to life. Jake's voice came through, weak but steady. "I've got the part." Heading back. Relief swept through the crew, but it was short-lived. As Jake approached Titan Station, alarms blared. The Krylos had sent scouts ahead of their main fleet, and one of their ships was closing in fast. Ethan Blake made a quick decision. "We can't let them take the station," he said. "Prepare for evacuation, but only after Jake docks." The crew scrambled to follow his orders, their movements frantic but focused. When Jake's shuttle finally docked, he stumbled out, pale and exhausted, clutching the precious component. Carlos Mendez rushed to help him, dragging him to safety just as the first enemy shots hit the station. The evacuation began, but not everyone made it out. Sam Dawson stayed behind to ensure the beacon's core remained operational, knowing full well it might cost him his life. "Go," he shouted at Laura and Ryan when they tried to convince him to leave. "Finish what we started." As the survivors fled to nearby ships, Ethan led a desperate counterattack against the Krylos scouts. His fleet was outnumbered, but he managed to buy enough time for the last of the crew to escape. Back aboard the evacuation vessel, Laura stared out the window, tears streaming down her face as she watched Titan Station burn. The beacon still stood, its structure glowing faintly in the darkness. Amid the chaos, personal conflicts erupted. Olivia Grant clashed with Mia Roberts over resource allocation, accusing her of prioritizing survival over the mission. "If we don't protect ourselves, there won't be anyone left to finish the beacon," Olivia snapped. "And if we don't finish the beacon, none of this matters," Maya shot back, her voice shaking with emotion. Despite the tension, unlikely bonds formed. Carlos, who had always been quiet and reserved, found himself working closely with Mia. Together, they devised a plan to reroute power from damaged systems to keep the evacuation ships running. Their teamwork earned them respect from the others, even in the darkest moments. When the dust settled, the survivors regrouped on one of the remaining ships. Laura sat alone in a corner, holding a data pad filled with notes about the beacon's message. She thought about Jake's bravery, Sam's sacrifice, and all the lives lost in the fight to keep hope alive. It wasn't fair, but she knew they couldn't give up now. Ryan joined her, sitting quietly for a moment before speaking. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "We have to." Laura nodded, wiping her tears. "Yeah, for them, and for everyone else counting on us." Far away, the beacon continued to pulse with energy, waiting for the final piece of its puzzle. Humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever, even as the shadow of the Krylos grew closer. The Krylos fleet arrived with terrifying speed, their ships dark and jagged like shards of broken glass against the stars. They wasted no time, launching a brutal attack on Jupiter's moons. The human colonies there were unprepared, their defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. Screams echoed through the comms as settlements were destroyed one by one. Ethan Blake led the counteroffensive from his flagship, the Aegis Asterisk. His fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but he refused to back down. "Hold the line," he shouted into the comms, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Explosions lit up the void as human ships clashed with the Krylos, each battle a desperate struggle for survival. On board the evacuation vessel carrying the survivors from Titan Station, Laura Monroe worked tirelessly to finalize the beacon's message. She knew this might be humanity's last chance to speak to the galaxy. Her hands trembled as she typed, rewriting the words over and over until they felt right. Ryan Carter stayed by her side, offering quiet support while keeping an eye on the battle reports streaming in. Amid the fighting, Communications Officer Ava Lewis intercepted strange signals from the Krylos fleet. At first, they seemed like random bursts of static, but as she analyzed them, patterns began to emerge. Fragments of meaning surfaced, cold, calculated phrases that sent chills down her spine. "They see us as flawed," Ava whispered to herself. "Not just dangerous, but unworthy of existence." When Laura heard about the discovery, she rushed to Ava's station. Together, they pieced together more of the Krylos language. What they found was sobering. The Krylos believed all organic life was corrupt, destined to destroy itself or others. To them, extermination wasn't cruelty. It was mercy. Laura felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. How could anyone look at humanity, their mistakes, their struggles, their resilience, and see only destruction? She realized then that the beacon's message had to do more than warn. It had to prove the Krylos wrong. It had to show the galaxy what humanity truly was. Flawed, yes, but capable of growth, compassion, and hope. With renewed determination, Laura rewrote the script. She included stories of humanity's greatest achievements, the building of civilizations, the exploration of space, the arts and sciences. She also acknowledged their darkest moments, wars, greed, environmental collapse, but framed them as lessons learned. "We are not perfect," she wrote, "but we endure, and we will fight for a better future." As the message took shape, Ethan fought desperately to hold off the Krylos advance. His ship sustained heavy damage, and casualties mounted. Still, he pushed forward, knowing every second counted. When reinforcements finally arrived, led by Captain Harper, the tide began to turn. The Krylos retreated temporarily, giving humanity a brief reprieve. Back on the evacuation vessel, Laura completed the message. She handed it to Ryan, who uploaded it into the beacon's core. For a moment, everyone gathered around, watching as the system processed the data. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery. Then the beacon activated. A pulse of energy shot outward, rippling through space like a wave. It carried Laura's words across light years, reaching distant stars and unknown worlds. Humanity's voice was out there now, a cry for unity and resistance against the coming storm. But the victory was short-lived. The Krylos regrouped and launched another wave of attacks. Ethan ordered the remaining fleet to fall back, ensuring the beacon remained safe. As he gave the order, he locked eyes with Laura over the comms. "It's done," she said softly. "The message is out there." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Good. Now let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." The battle raged on, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. The beacon's signal traveled farther than anyone had imagined, touching corners of the galaxy humanity had never seen. Somewhere out there, someone, or something, might hear it, and if they did, perhaps they would stand with humanity. Perhaps together they could face the Krylos. For now, though, the fight continued. The survivors clung to the beacon's message as a reminder of why they fought, not just for survival, but for the chance to build something better. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity refused to give up. Their resolve burned brighter than ever, a spark of light in the endless darkness. The beacon's pulse spread across the galaxy, carrying humanity's message into the vast unknown. But the Krylos were relentless. Their ships regrouped and descended upon Titan Station with devastating force. Ethan Blake knew they couldn't hold the station any longer. Every second counted, and his mind raced as he weighed their options. "We need to destroy the station," Ethan said over the comms, his voice calm but firm. "If we overload the reactors, we can create an explosion big enough to cripple their fleet." Silence followed his words. The crew on the evacuation ships exchanged worried glances. Destroying Titan Station meant sacrificing everything they had worked so hard to build. But they all understood. It was the only way to buy humanity more time. Ryan Carter turned to Laura Monroe, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. "He's right," Ryan said quietly. "It's the only shot we've got." Laura nodded, though her heart ached. She thought of Sam Dawson and all the others who had given their lives to keep the beacon alive. If they abandoned it now, their sacrifices would be for nothing. "Do it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Make sure the beacon stays active until the last moment." Ethan stayed behind on the Aegis *, coordinating the evacuation while preparing the fail-safe mechanism. His hands moved quickly over the controls, programming the station's reactors to overload. Around him, alarms blared, and the ship shook from enemy fire. He ignored the chaos, focusing on the task at hand. On the evacuation vessel, Laura watched the station grow smaller through the window. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered silent thanks to everyone who had fought to make the beacon possible. Beside her, Maya Roberts held Carlos Mendez's hand tightly, both of them bracing for what was to come. Detonation in 30 seconds. Ethan's voice crackled over the comms. His tone was steady, but there was a hint of sadness beneath it. He had made peace with his decision. This was his duty, to protect humanity, no matter the cost. The Krylos ships closed in, their weapons firing relentlessly. Explosions rocked the station, sending debris spiraling into space. Ethan didn't flinch. He activated the countdown sequence and set the Aegis on autopilot, ensuring it would escape before the blast. 10 seconds, he said, his voice softer now. Good luck, everyone. As the timer reached 0, the station erupted in a blinding flash of light. The explosion tore through the Krylos fleet, crippling dozens of ships and scattering the rest. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, the void illuminated by the fading glow of the blast. On the evacuation vessel, the survivors stared in stunned silence. Laura pressed her forehead against the cold glass, tears streaming down her face. She felt a mix of grief and pride. Grief for Ethan and the others who had stayed behind, and pride for what they had accomplished. The beacon's message was still out there, carried by the energy of the explosion even farther than before. Back on Mars Colony Prime, fragments of the beacon's signal began to reach distant worlds. Reports trickled in of alien civilizations responding to the call. Some sent aid, others pledged support, and a few even offered refuge. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. The message had ignited a spark of unity among the stars. Mia and Carlos worked together to repair damaged systems on the evacuation ship, their movements filled with quiet determination. They talked about the future, about rebuilding, about hope. We'll get through this, Carlos said, his voice steady. Because that's what we do. Laura sat nearby, clutching a data pad containing Ethan's final orders. She thought about his sacrifice, about all the lives lost in the fight to keep humanity alive. It wasn't fair, but she knew one thing for certain. Their resolve would never fade. Even in the face of annihilation, humanity refused to give up. Far away, the beacon's signal continued its journey, a testament to humanity's courage and resilience. Somewhere out there, someone might hear it and join the fight. And when that day came, humanity would be ready. Weeks passed after the destruction of Titan Station. The survivors gathered on Mars Colony Prime, their numbers smaller but their spirits unbroken. The red sands stretched endlessly under a pale pink sky, a silent witness to humanity's struggle. Though battered and grieving, they clung to hope. Reports of distant worlds responding to the beacon's message brought a fragile sense of unity. For the first time in years, it felt like humanity wasn't alone. Laura Monroe stood at the edge of the colony, staring out at the horizon. She held a small data pad in her hands, its screen displaying Ethan Blake's final orders. His sacrifice weighed heavily on her heart, but she found solace in knowing that his actions had given them a fighting chance. The beacon's message was still traveling across the stars, carrying humanity's story to anyone willing to listen. Nearby, Mia Roberts and Carlos Mendez worked together to repair salvaged equipment. Their laughter broke through the quiet, a reminder that life continued even in the darkest times. Mia paused for a moment, wiping sweat from her brow, and looked up at Laura. "Do you think anyone will really come to help us?" she asked. Laura smiled faintly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if they do, we'll be ready." Ryan Carter joined them, carrying tools and spare parts. He set them down with a grunt and leaned against a nearby wall. "We've got enough to keep us busy for a while," he said. "Rebuilding won't be easy, but at least we've got a plan." The plan was simple: survive, rebuild, and prepare for the next fight. The Krylos weren't gone. They were regrouping, licking their wounds after the explosion at Titan Station. But humanity now had allies scattered across the galaxy. Ships carrying supplies and volunteers began arriving, sent by civilizations touched by the beacon's message. Some came to offer aid, others to learn about humanity's resolve. Together, they formed a coalition, a fragile alliance united by a shared goal. President Daniel Hayes addressed the survivors during a rare moment of calm. Standing before a crowd of weary faces, he spoke with quiet determination. "We've lost so much," he said, "but we've also gained something precious: hope." The beacon showed the galaxy who we are. It showed them that even when everything seems lost, we refuse to give up. His words resonated deeply. People nodded, their eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew they couldn't face it alone. The coalition grew stronger each day, fueled by stories of courage and sacrifice. In quieter moments, Laura often thought about Ethan. She imagined him looking down at them, proud of what they had achieved. His decision to stay behind had saved countless lives, giving humanity a chance to rebuild and fight another day. She whispered softly to herself, "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." Far beyond the stars, the beacon's signal continued its journey, carrying humanity's last warning and its promise to the galaxy. It was a message of resilience, creativity, and hope. A message that said, no matter how dark the night, there was always a chance for dawn. As the sun set over Mars, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the survivors gathered around a makeshift fire. They shared stories of those they had lost, of battles fought, and lessons learned. In those moments, they found strength in each other. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it endured. And as long as they refused to give up, they would always have a future worth fighting for. Somewhere out there, among the stars, someone might hear their message. And when that day came, humanity would stand ready, not just to survive, but to thrive.